Yes, Waqar. So it's 4 o'clock right now in India and 3:30 in the UAE.
That's right.
And we have approximately 43 participants on the group. We were expecting between 25 and 30. We've got around 43 people. As I mentioned to you, in the audience today, we have clients of Talent Corner, which means HR heads at Talent Corner. We've had our franchise partners. We have our own team members. We have this network individuals from BNI, from Roundtable, from Ascent, and from Rotary.
Okay.
And we have a few clients of mine and yours from the UAE as well.
Sure.
Just to introduce you, as I've already mentioned in the email, Waqar is an HR expert. He'd like to be known as a headhunter, a HR expert, an HR consultant, a talent recruitment specialist. He's been based in the UAE, has had several years of experience currently working with Americano Computers and heading their HR services division. In my conversation with him yesterday, I learned that they are looking to bring in a lot of business from the government out there, and they're going to be spreading their wings to other parts of the world as well. In the interesting conversation that I had with Waqar, we spoke about the kind of mistakes that clients and people make while doing interviews. And our intention is that Waqar shares his experiences in terms of what mistake he's seen people making, which can actually not serve the purpose of the interview, and how we can correct the same. Waqar, your experience, I would request you to share, like we spoke yesterday, in terms of a client, an entrepreneur, a HR recruiter, okay, because we've got all the three audiences today in our forum today. So I'd like you to share your experiences in all three perspectives and give your suggestions according to that. I'm going to put myself on mute, Waqar, and now it's over to you.
Sure.
Thanks, Waqar.
All right, thank you very much, Rashish, for the intro. And it's a great opportunity for me to be here and share my experience with all of your participants. This is a very important area which is usually ignored. Either we're talking from the client perspective or from HR perspective. Like I've been working in human resources for almost 16 years now. And over the years, I've done numerous interviews individually and during interview panels. And since I'm working on the HR services side as well, so I've been working with several clients in UAE where I've observed lots of weaknesses in terms of preparation, in terms of hiring the right resources. There have been usually complaints from the customer side that they're not getting the right people from the market. With respect to my experience in UAE, there are like hundreds and thousands of job seekers that visit UAE every year, but not all of them are qualified. The amount of quality has reduced over a period of time, but that doesn't mean that there are no quality people coming in. What needs to be done is that we need to improve our processes. We need to improve our approach in evaluating the right candidate, the right person. And these evaluations and the mistakes that I will be highlighting in today's session are the things that actually sometimes discourage good resources from joining the company, and also hinders the hiring managers or the clients from getting the right person. The notion of the right person for the right job has become very critical in today's market. And it's not just your products and services that matter the most, it's the people which represent the company and which take your products and services forward. That is why people have become the greatest asset for any organization. Wherever you are working, either you're in India or in the Middle East or in the Western countries, they have become the most critical competitive advantage. If you have quality resources, they can pitch your products in a much better way than your competitors. Now, it's not just the selection process. This is one element that we're going to talk about, which is the selection process, which is interviewing. But it starts from recruitment, where you are defining the whole process. So although I'm going to be focusing on how you can improve your mistakes, what are the areas which are lacking in the hiring managers or in the interviewers, and how those areas can be overcome. But I would like to highlight the importance of recruitment as well, particularly from the client perspective. You need to completely identify what kind of a person you require in your organization. If you're clear on that point, the recruitment is based on those expectations, and then you can get the right person. And during this whole process, from recruitment till hiring, the one major step is the interviewing. Now, there are various types of interviews. If you Google, you'll see lots of types of interviews, but I would like to categorize those types of interviews into 4 categories. One is the phone screening, which is the very basic and very initial step and the first contact when you make with the candidate. Now, these phone interviews are basically done. Their objective is to clarify the areas which are confusing in the profile, or get the basic information that you can use to assess that whether this person is actually what he says he is. Now, I've done numerous interviews, and what happens is that the candidates, what they do, because they're trying to sell themselves, we have to understand their perspective as well. Now, there are 2 different types of candidates. One are those who over-exaggerate everything. You catch them during the phone screening process. And then there are those who are not exaggerators, but they are good actors. They have the skills, they have the competencies, they have what it takes in them to do the job, and they can really project themselves in a good way. And that comes in a later stage when we start the interviewing process. When we do the interviews, we can get in those people to get the right information out of them. So one is phone screening, which is the initial and basic step in the selection process. And then the other one is one-to-one interview, which is commonly used by most of us, by most of the organizations. Now, this one-to-one interview can be done through telephones, through video conferencing, could be face-to-face. It could be a behavioral interview. It could be a stress interview. It could be a technical interview, depending on the situation, depending on the requirement. This one-on-one interview can be shaped accordingly. The objective of this step is to get a comprehensive understanding and evaluation of the candidate's skills, knowledge, and abilities in a more detailed way. Then, as I said before, there's one more type of interviews: telephonic and video conferencing. Also, it's same as, could be as a panel interview, it could be a one-on-one interview, and they're mostly done for the purpose of, for instance, if the hiring manager is sitting in the US and the candidate is in India. So this bridges the gap, and you can do telephonic interviews or video interviews. And we'll get into that later on in today's session. And then there are panel interviews where more than one interviewers sitting in the same interview. It saves time. It could be one is the hiring manager, for instance, one is the finance manager or the technical manager, and one could be the CEO. It saves time, and all the 3 people or 4 people or how many interview panelists are there, they get to evaluate the candidate in the same setting. Now, Apart from from all these types, interviewers make mistakes. And in my observation, interviewing has become more of a task than a process or a responsibility. And hiring managers are usually, the major mistake lies in the mindset, which has unfortunately evolved over a period of time, that they have to do this thing because that's their job. They have to take interviews, they have to hire people, and they don't have much time because they're busy. So they're just waiting for the interviewee to come and they just get on with it. And they mostly rely on their hunch, on their gut feeling. If they feel good about it, if some candidate has touched some good areas which they like to hear, they will go with it. That's a big mistake, and we'll get into that later on as well. But as I said, because it has become more of a task than a responsibility, interviewers don't prepare themselves. And that's the first major mistake and most common mistake that interviewers do. Either the interviewer is a client or a hiring manager or a direct hiring manager, they don't prepare for themselves. And the critical element in the preparation is the job description. Now, job description might be available at good organizations. They develop job descriptions for every role. But if you're talking about small or medium organizations, they don't really pay much attention to this element. And your interviewee, the whole interview process based on this is constructed around the job description. Your interview is as good as your job description. If it is poorly developed, your interview result will be poor. You will not be able to get the right people. And I have laid a lot of stress into on this thing that please prepare your job descriptions. Get as much details as possible. Either those are behavioral aspects, either those are technical aspects, or you're looking for the qualifications. Each and everything needs to be clearly documented. The knowledge, skill, and abilities, the KSAs, need to be clearly defined so that when you construct your interview around that job description, you know which areas to focus, you know what questions to ask. And when you are evaluating a resume, as a recruiter, as an interviewer, you know what are the areas you need to focus and what kind of results you require. The second part is reviewing the resume. I've seen a lot of times that the interviewers, they only look at the resume when they are actually sitting in the interview, and they take 1-2 minutes to go through the resume. That's the most horrible mistake for me, and it gives a bad impression to the client, to the interviewee as well. So what you need to do is take 5 minutes out of your busy schedule before the interview. Sit down at a quiet place if possible. Go through each and everything in the profile. That means you need to highlight the areas of interest. And you must be asking yourself, is there anything strange or interesting about this profile that you need to explore during the interview? Or if there are any work samples or designs that are available that you can discuss during the interview? Or do you need to check the validity of the claims made in the profile? Now we know that when the candidates, they apply for a job, good candidates, they look at the job description if available, and then they develop their resumes accordingly. They highlight the areas which are required. But are those areas actually valid? If somebody's making a claim that he achieved high sales targets, how far is that true? So you need to highlight those things in the profile before the interview starts. So we have done that. Normally what happens is that what recruiters do or HR people do, they simply call the candidate and they just tell them, okay, this is your interview time, this is your schedule, come for the interview on this day or in this time. But that is a big opportunity missed. That is the first contact where you build your rapport with the candidate and you put them at ease. The best practice is that you need to share the details about the interview. And you just let them know, you need to let them know what kind of interview they're going into. Is it a technical interview? Is it a behavioral interview? What will be the structure? Who will be taking the interview? Share the job description with them so that they can prepare themselves. Normally job descriptions are not available either in the job posts or during the interviews. So it's like you don't know what are you going to prepare for. You just know the title and you try to do everything, you try to cover everything. And that not only just misleads or distracts the whole discussion, but also makes the candidate uncomfortable. So share as much details as possible so that the candidate feels at ease and is at the comfort level. Building a rapport is the most critical moments during the start of the interview. And that sets the tone for the entire interview. How can you do that? Now, you have to let the candidate take or assume the role of doing most of the talking. If you're putting him in a position where he assumes the role of just answering the question that you're asking, okay, how are you? How are you doing? How was your trip? So the candidate will start getting in a position where he thinks that, okay, this is my role. I'm going to be answering the questions. And the whole purpose of the discussion-oriented interview dies just right there and then. So what you need to do is just start small talk with them. How you can do that? You can begin with the normal pleasantries and let the candidate assume major portion of this early conversation. For instance, let me give you an example. If you have studied the resume, you can ask questions about some of the areas of interest, for instance, hobbies, sports, if they have done traveling. And you can base your initial small talk conversation with them, a rapport building, an icebreaker with them, based on those areas of interest. For instance, you can ask them that I've noticed in your profile that you have traveled a lot. Can you tell me which of the areas you have traveled or which countries have you traveled so far and which of those countries have you liked the most? That is kind of a question which requires thinking, which requires explanation, and that will get them started on it. The objective is to give them, drive out a 2 to 3 minute conversation where they do most of the talking and you listen. Another example could be that while reviewing your profile, I noticed that you were awarded Employee of the Year. Can you tell me what was the criteria of that award and what were your great achievements during that year? Excuse me. So you have to start with that, and that sets the tone. And once they start talking, they start comfortable. And once they start a frank discussion with you, a candid discussion with you, you will be able to get the exact right, truthful information from the candidate. Because otherwise what happens is that if the interview becomes more of an interrogation, where you're asking the question and the candidate is answering those questions, the candidate will design his replies in a way which might get a favorable response from you. So the objective of the interview is get to the right information. And for that, you have to maintain control. I've observed during my career that once the interviewers start doing the rapport building, they get carried away with it. The initial discussion takes so long that the whole process gets distracted. The conversation goes to a whole different way. So you have to maintain control. You have to maintain control of the discussion. How can you do that? So you have to make sure that the whole conversation is balanced. And you balance it with patience, and you give appropriate coverage to all the areas which you've highlighted, remember, at the start of the interview, before the start of the interview, when you go through the resume and you go through the job description. There are different techniques to maintain control. One of that is interruption. Now, the sound of it might feel like it might be rude, but you have to time your interruption in a way that you have to anticipate that the candidate has finished his thought but hasn't completed his sentence yet. So you have to time your interruption with a positive reinforcement. For instance, if the candidate is talking about his previous accomplishments, you can say, "That sounds interesting," or "That must be very satisfying for you." And from there, you can move on to the next area. Another way of maintaining control during the interview is keeping an interview guide. This is the most simplest and the best thing that you can develop for somebody who is new to this process, or who's trying to learn to control the interviews. An interview guide is a list of, or is a sequence of questions that you will ask to the interviewee. And you know which areas to focus. You will not lose sight of the target, and you will not lose track. It provides a system, it brings order and intensive coverage to the conversation. Let's not forget that our objective as hiring managers is to develop a conversation. Once again, we don't want our interview process to become a police interrogation. He's not a criminal. He's there to find a job, to get a job, or maybe get a dream job. And your objective is to get the right information from that candidate. And that can only be done through a positive discussion-oriented interviews. But don't try to maintain strict control. Be patient, be flexible, and be very tactful during the whole process. Another form of maintaining control, and it can be done in another way, is that you need to structure your interviews. Now, since you're not prepared, and most of the time interviewers do not prepare anything for the interview, and as I said in the start of my conversation, that it has become more of a task than a responsibility. So it depends on their gut feeling, and they go from response to response through follow-up questions. And that is that completely is useless for me, because it's just that what you feel is right. You might get the right candidate. It doesn't happen all the time. So you have to keep it structured. How you can do that? You need to develop information in a chronological and systematic manner. For example, they should be asked to start with the very first job and work their way up to the recent one. Similarly, in educational aspect, it is always best to start from the high school and working their way up to the highest degree. make sure that you exhaust all one area first before moving on to the next, instead of mixing everything up, which usually happens in unstructured interviews. And it serves no purpose. Most of the interviewers try to lead the interviews. Now, there was a time when I was working in one organization, and one of the clients wanted to interview the candidates, and he wanted to assess if the candidate is good or not. I was shocked to hear that, and it was a sales position. And what happened that, okay, so he started asking certain questions from the candidate. What were those questions? They were like, okay, can you do sales? And the candidate goes, yes, of course I can do sales. Can you handle pressure? And the candidate goes, yes, I can definitely handle pressure. Have you met high targets? And the candidate goes, yes, I've achieved very high targets. Any question for which whose answer is either yes or no is a close-ended question. And you are not actually getting any information out of it. You are actually leading the conversation. You are trying to listen to what you want from the candidate. So questions whose responses is entirely one-sided or very obvious are completely useless and must be avoided at all the time. So any question asking for real thinking or interpretation is open-ended. For example, what are your specific job strengths? Another example could be, what has been the biggest accomplishment during your career so far, and why? Another example could be, what was the most complex problem you have solved, and how did you go about solving it? These are type of questions that you can ask, open-ended questions that you can ask from the candidate, where he will start explaining it. You can ask for examples. You can ask to demonstrate those abilities through these questions. However, the questions should be brief and to the point, and you should use simple language. Unfortunately, some interviewers, they use difficult English language vocabulary, which is sometimes difficult for the candidate to understand, and it confuses them. And once the candidate loses confidence in understanding, then he will not be able to answer it. And unfortunately, sometimes if the candidate doesn't have that kind of a confidence, they will not ask you to rephrase your question, because they are afraid that if they ask the question to be rephrased, they are showing lack of understanding, and they will not get a positive response from the interviewer. So it is our responsibility that we speak the language of the candidate, which is easier for him to understand. Which means if we are communicating in English language, it has to be simple and easy to understand for the candidate. And we have to make sure that we are talking less and allowing the candidate to talk more. Numerous times I've seen this happening, that especially when it happens with the clients as well, they start explaining about their company, their values, what kind of a person they require, what this job would do. Yes, you can share this information, but the whole conversation should not be about this, because this is not about you. The interview, the process, the objective of the interview is to know about the candidate. So what you need to do is allow the candidate to speak more about his personalities, his experiences, his past experiences, his education, because that tells a lot about him. For instance, if you're talking about work history, anyone who has gone through tough times, has taken pressure over a period of time, or has taken up complex responsibilities, it is highly likely that if he comes to your organization, he will work with that commitment, and he would be able to handle the critical responsibilities of the job that you're looking to hire for. Similarly, as far as their competencies are concerned, somebody who's been working hard throughout the career, working from teenage life up till now, will show the characteristics of that person, that he's hardworking, is committed to the job, and he will bring the same positiveness into your organization as well, same commitment to your organization. And of course, somebody who's been hopping jobs, working in one organization 2 or 3 months, either it's a sales role, because there's no misconception that if somebody who's in sales and he's hopping jobs, it's usual for salespeople. No, it's not. But this tells about the work history, will tell you about their commitment to their roles. And that can only be retrieved if you are allowing the candidate to speak, to share more of the person. I would say 85% of the talk time should be given to the candidate. 85 to 90%, as much as possible, he needs to speak. But again, of course, we should not lose track of the whole discussion. And because we are interviewers, we are in a position where we are assessing the candidates. A lot of times, interviewers get carried away and they become psychoanalysts. And it becomes a psychological analysis of the person, their personality, because we want to know them, who they are and what they are. And we try to relate to our experience and to our beliefs. That's not our job. Our job as an interviewer, either you're a client, you want a person who's good for your organization and who meets the criteria defined in the job description. Your job is not to know what he believes in. Even if it's good for understanding the person, but it should not cover the whole interview. That's just one portion, just one part of the interview where you need to know the personal characteristics of that person, the values of that person, whether he's reliable, whether he's dependable. But unfortunately, interviewers, they enjoy this portion where they feel on the upper hand and they feel the need to, like they say that I need to know this person, who he is and what he is. But they forget that the conclusion or the assessment of that interview must be drawn based on the objective and measurable data, not about their beliefs, not just about their beliefs or their personality characteristics. So that is, and that also reminds me of a very critical element, or one of the mistakes that occurs from this aspect is personal bias. If you have certain experiences in life, if you have certain beliefs of yourself, unfortunately, it naturally comes into play, which should be avoided. So if you have certain beliefs, you like people who match with those beliefs. Or if you have certain experience in your career, you evaluate the other person based on those experiences, which might or might not be applicable all the time. That is why we should not jump to conclusions. There's a saying that first impression is the last impression. Well, research over the period of time has shown that this is not the case, not all the time at least. First impression is not the last impression and should not be made as last impression. Now, there are different types of people who come for interviews. I'll give you an example from my experience in UAE. A lot of people come here, as I said, like hundreds and thousands of people visit UAE every year. They're looking for jobs to make a living. They have a lot to lose because they have spent money to come here. 100,000 rupees or 200,000, 300,000. They're spending that money and that makes them desperate. And when they go for the interview, they are in a state of mind where they're feeling to themselves that they have a lot to lose. And if they don't make it through this interview, they might not be successful. That feeling itself, unfortunately, impacts their self-confidence. So a person who walks in the interview might seem confused or nervous. It's natural. And it is our responsibility to understand this aspect because they are human beings. They're not robots, they are machines. Not everybody is same, but they have the potential. And it is our responsibility to tap into that potential, to find that potential in them, instead of judging them based on their looks, based on their apparent, their appearance, their physical appearance. And that is why we need to put them at ease, make them relax, and then slowly bring them into the conversation. And you will see, if you practice this, you will see that you will find a lot of people who appear nervous, but when they start speaking, when they're at ease, when they're comfortable, you will get the best out of them. We must understand that the cultural backgrounds are different. Traditions, norms of a person must be taken into account and shouldn't be drawn out based on what we believe is right. Our conclusion should be holistic instead of basing it on one aspect of personality or one aspect of the interview. Which means that we should not be judging people, which another mistake which interviewers make. Because the interviewer must keep his own personal beliefs aside during the interview process. If they don't like anything, you will see on their faces. Sometimes the interviewers are sarcastic. As I said, most of us, they build an impression based on the first perception we get. Is everything all right? Ashish, are you getting me?
Yeah, I'm going to do the refill. Don't worry. I'll stop the share.
Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay. So because we are human beings as well, what happens is that if we don't like anything, I suppose if we have a certain belief, we have a certain experience, and we ask a certain question from the candidate, and they don't give the answer that we like to hear, you will sometimes the interviewers, they make faces, they show expression of unsatisfaction, or sometimes they have a sarcastic tone. this offsets the candidate, and it's highly unfortunate that it happens during the interview process. And as an interviewer, we must avoid that. We must always make sure that we maintain a neutral expression. We must always have a positive body language during the interviews. And it is always encouraging that even if we are listening, we are asking for their weaknesses. If we are asking about certain negative aspects of their careers, for instance, somebody got fired, or somebody has lack of self-confidence, or it is based on us how we ask those questions without showing any judgments. For instance, there's a typical question there's a typical question which is asked by interviewers, which is about the weaknesses. So, what are your weaknesses? Or why did you get fired? Or are you punctual? The best way is that you can rephrase your questions and ask them in a way which is positive or which is positively reinforcing. For instance, what are the areas of improvement? Instead of asking, what are your weaknesses? So yeah, these are the areas, these are the things that we must make sure that as an interviewer, in whatever capacity that we are sitting there, we have to maintain positivity, because if we are showing those expressions, if we are negative in our thought process, the same will reflect in our evaluation, and then the same will reflect on the candidates as well. Let us not forget that our focus is not just to get favorable responses from the interviewee. It's not about their strengths. It's not about what they can do. It's also about what they can't do. It's about their, how would I say, the areas of improvement. I think that's the right word to say. So if you're getting all the favorable responses, that means something's wrong with your interview, with the interview process. And if you offset the candidate, you will never get those areas of improvement. And everybody has those. Not everybody is perfect. But what you need to see is that if those liabilities outweigh the assets, or whether assets outweigh the liability. And that's where the potential lies. There are areas, definitely somebody will lack communication, but he has good technical skills. Can you work on those liabilities? But first thing and foremost, we have to encourage the candidate to share those negativities. But of course, let's not get carried away with that as well. It doesn't mean that if somebody is not punctual, you will also positively reinforce it that, oh yeah, I understand, people are sometimes not punctual. Of course, you cannot say that. There are red areas as well, which you cannot positively reinforce, but you can definitely encourage through your conversation without passing judgments, where the candidate feels comfortable in sharing even those aspects. And then, as I said, throughout the conversation, throughout the interviews, you have to stay focused. You have to make sure that what are the results that you require, and what kind of a person you require. Keep the discussion on the right path and maintain the structure of the interview. So these are the top most common mistakes that interviewers make. I was reading something some time ago, and I came across something, and I would like to share this in the end with you, with all of you. That in the final analysis, interviewers not only evaluate a candidate's assets and liabilities in terms of the job requirements, they must also judge the extent to which the assets outweigh the liabilities and vice versa. The interview that results in no unfavorable information is inescapably poor interview. And that's the gist of the whole process. So just to recap quickly in the end, and then I will take your questions afterwards. Please work on your job descriptions. Clarify your expectations from the role. Be objective and measurable, and have measurable expectations. Understand that we are human beings as well, and we are interviewing humans as well. They're not robots, neither we are. We will all make mistakes, but it is necessary that we realize what mistakes are we making so that we can avoid those mistakes, because that will give us self-awareness. And if we are self-aware of our mistakes, we will be able to improve our process. We will be able to improve our potential. We will be able to improve our procedures and processes, our evaluation and our analysis during the interview process. Have spare time. Work on this. This is not a task. This is a process. This is a responsibility. Because as an interviewer, as a hiring manager, it is your critical job. It is your critical responsibility to bring in the right person for the right job. And that can only be done if you are well prepared and invest time into this process. Thank you. I'll take your questions now.
Thanks, Waqar. What I'm going to do is we're going to invite questions. We request you to put your questions in the chat box so that Waqar can take a look at it and can respond to those questions. Okay, it seems that your presentation was quite crystal clear. There doesn't seem to be any question coming in. We'll wait for a minute more, and then if there are no questions, we'll quickly thank you and we'll close this webinar.
Sure. Rashesh.
Yes.
Rashesh, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please. Can you just introduce yourself and then you can ask a question?
Yeah, I am Manish Jain from Hubli. So, sir, I had a question like most of the job descriptions mention only about the skills and the knowledge required for a particular job role. But the most important thing is the attitude which the candidate carries, and which is never usually mentioned in most of the JDs. And because of the time, most of the times the candidate get rejected because of the attitude. So how do we fill that gap wherein the attitude also is mentioned in the JD? Is it clear?
Yes, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Normally what happens is that there are different approaches. As far as attitude is concerned, you can do that through the aptitude tests. And if the aptitude tests are not available, then it becomes your responsibility to gather that information through your interview process. And usually it's done for the higher level positions. The attitude comes from the personality characteristics. And those are defined in the job description. For instance, what kind of reliability you're looking for, what kind of dependability the person should have, what are the values of that person. If the previous experience was consistent. What happens normally if somebody, I'll give you an example. Normally somebody comes up and says, I left the job without finding another one. And the reason they give is that they didn't have enough time to apply for an interview or apply for a job. So I left and then moved and then went on to look for a job. Now, if you take that on the face value, it shows the incompetence of that person in itself. And these are some of the examples that you can use and see from the past experience and then explore during the interview process, that what is his attitude towards his job, what is his attitude towards his work. For instance, you can ask, what was the work environment like? And how did you fit in? So there are a certain range of questions that you can develop and ask from the interviewee and assess their attitude. I'm not sure if that can be literally mentioned in the job description.
Yeah, all right, thank you, sir.
But based on your interview questions, you can explore those areas.
Thank you, sir.
So I think I've got another question. Sometimes we won't get clear JD from client. So another question is that sometimes we won't get clear JD from client, just one liner. What do? Ask as much information as possible. It is your responsibility, and clients do that. So what you need to do is go to the client, sit with them, have a meeting, have a discussion, and then go through the job description. Now, as I said, not many organizations develop job descriptions. They will not have enough time, they will not have enough information to put in a document. So what you can do is that you should prepare like a form and take that form to the client and sit with them and have a discussion. And then as you discuss with the client, you note down their requirements, and that will become your job description. Next question is, when the final interview is being conducted by a panel of interviewers and if there is a difference of opinion in between the interviewers, how do you arrive at a final conclusion on whom to select? Yeah, that's another good question. Best way to go about this is to have a measurable evaluation. In my experience, we develop a point system. We have certain areas of competencies, knowledge, and skills, and those have weightages. Simply go through the weightages, assign weightages to each area, and then take the evaluation based on that, and see what kind of result you will get. Okay, so job descriptions will not be given in clear. In many companies they will say we want the requirement for a particular position. I can't say what to do. I think I've already answered that question. Hi, Chirang. Many of the hiring managers are not clear themselves about what exactly they are looking for, and they keep changing their expectations throughout the recruitment process. How can we help them get clarity without making them feel bad? The best practice in that, again, is to have multiple discussions. Sit with them, have a discussion. You are the HR expert. You know what they don't know, because they in their mindset, they only want the person. So it is your job to make your life easier, is to sit with them and have a discussion. Go through their processes, go through their department expectation, go through their experiences, talk to their managers, the employees in the team, talk to them and have a discussion. What is the role? What is the job? What are the expectations? What are the targets? What they want out of this position? The more questions, the more you probe with the client, the more information you will get, and that will help you define a document. Then share that document with the client and ask them to review it, or just sit with them and have a discussion that these are your evaluations, these are your findings. If there's anything they would further like to add into it, and I think so that document will become your Bible, I would say. Okay, next. Okay, Okay, another question is, Disha, in my previous company, I had seen wrong feedback given by references, given by candidates out of jealousy. How to tackle such a situation? As much as background checks are better, definitely you don't always get the right information. You do get information from the interviews, and try to do some research of your own. That will enable you to get to the right information. How to identify if a candidate is given fake information from the first call itself? We come across many fake candidates, but that is in the later rounds of the interview. Well, the first interview, the initial interview, the screening interview is critical. That is why, because you are verifying the information that they are giving you. Yes, it is possible. It is very possible that they share information, fake information, and when you put them through the interview process, then you find out that it's not actually right. But if you're clever enough, if you can read under the lines, between the lines, you will be able to find who's faking it and who's not. Job description will not be given in clear. In many companies they will say one requirements applicable. I think I've answered the question. What are the challenges we will face in recruitment? What exactly companies going to look for? That's a question from Rosalina. What are the challenges we will be facing in 2020 recruitment? What exactly company is going to look for? Well, that depends on the role and depends on the company, but people are looking for the whole package. That is the trend, and that is the biggest challenge. They want one person to have all the capabilities. As the hiring manager, as a recruiter, working with clients, because clients usually do this. They say, I want this person and he should be able to do everything. He should be a good accountant, he should be good in sales, he should be good in HR, he should be able to do two-person's job. That's the challenge you will face with the clients. Because why? Because of economic situation, pockets are getting smaller. Especially with the small and medium businesses, it's really tough. So they will share a high demand, and they will challenge you with this, and they will give you sometimes unrealistic expectations or requirements. Basically, what they want is one person should be able to do every job. But you have to set the expectations right, and you have to be clear and put the expectations in document form so that there is no deviation from that. You have to set the expectations of your clients, and that can be done through ongoing discussions. And we have done that with our clients as well, and we have experienced that all the time, that we get unusual expectations. But if you set the expectations right from the start, things can work out well. How can we evaluate clients' seriousness in the shared opening? Sometimes we keep sharing the profiles, but the client either does not give a feedback or reject the profiles without any justified reason. Also, they keep changing their requirements and expectations quite often. If they sign an agreement with you, if they sign a contract with you and they are paying you for those services, you should work on your contract and make them serious. Because what happens, what we normally do, we have certain clauses in our contract where once the interview process starts, and for some reason they don't want the candidate, let's suppose they say that the position is no more required, they pay for the amount of effort spent for that position. So once the monetary aspect comes in the contract, then people get serious. So Neil, business associate from Mumbai, while exploring the first level of contact for mid-level to senior level positions through a job portal like LinkedIn, the moment recruiters strike the discussion with the candidate, senior manager always wanted to know who is the client first before engaging further in the discussion. How do we handle such a situation? It is your right not to share that information. But if it's all right for the client that you can share at least the industry, because normally what happens is that the client, the candidates, what do you say, the candidates' apprehension is that maybe they know that person, they know your client, or they have already applied there. So they don't want to go back to that company again. So have a discussion with your client if it's okay to reveal the name, because that will save your time and the candidate's time as well. If not, then you can politely ask them that at the moment you're not able to reveal the client's information. We will further review your profile if you're interested, and if everything goes fine, we'll bring you for the interview and share further details about the client. Anjani Verma, my question is, most of the time we also get candidates, those are interested, also shortlisted from client, and we receive confirmation email from candidates that are ready to come for an interview. But most of the time they don't turn up to come for an interview, which make more embarrassing to discuss with the client. It is 100% right. And honestly, this is the most embarrassing and most awkward situation on one hand, it's very frustrating as well. Because sometimes, like, I will share my experience with you, that we share candidate detail with a client, we share confirmed dates, times, everything is done, and right before the interview, right, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago before, when you call them that today you have the interview, are you coming? They will say no. And sometimes you have scheduled 5 interviews, 3 of them will not turn up. But I think if the client, if you have a good rapport with the client, they will understand that it's not your fault, and it happens all the time. In Gulf, in Oman, this is Disha. Is Gulf and Oman is likely to change their rule for having 20% local candidates, as now most of the companies are likely to face lack of skilled manpower? Yeah, like in UAE also, they are doing Emiratization. They are encouraging their locals to take up jobs. Mostly they are hired in the government departments, but they're also encouraging private organizations as well. There's a huge availability of expat manpower, so I'm not quite sure how far will that be successful. Sarang, how the weightages are distributed, I mean to technical skills, communication skills. You have to sit with the technical managers for that and have a discussion with them, because you're not a technical expert, they are. So you have to sit with them, and when you're assessing the job description and you are evaluating the job description, they can help you with that. Plus, if you do a market survey, if you are in touch with market insights, then you will also know that what are your benchmarks looking for, and what kind of weightages are you looking for. But I think this is something that you can discuss with the technical managers, and they can help you with assigning the distribution for technical skills. Azhar Ahmed, Azhar, there are requirements asking for the niche skills which are new, but still ask for the experienced candidates. How to handle them? You have to give them your analysis. Yes, it happens also. Sorry, where you are. Yeah, so it happens also. For instance, I was doing some hiring for an IT company, and they were looking for a certain skill set which is not really available in the market. So once you do your survey, once you do your market research, you can share that research with the client and say, these are the experiences available in the market, and this is the realistic approach. Once again, if you have built a good rapport and reliability and trustability with the client, they will listen to you and they will understand that what is humanly possible and what's not. At the end of the day, you are doing them a favor. You want their positions to be filled, but you have to be realistic. I would suggest that you give certain options if they can hire people from outside the country. For instance, if a certain skill set is not available in the local market, but it's available, let's suppose it's available in India, Pakistan, or in any other country, give them certain options to work with. Not just simply say that, sir, this cannot happen, this is not available. Give them options. And then work your way around it. Abhishek, the question, sometimes we come across any candidate who has an employment gap of a few months in his career as she was trying to venture into entrepreneurship, but due to setback, they might be looking for a job again. According to you, should we, recruiters, share this with the HR client in good faith? Will it be taken by HR in positive spirit? Please share your thoughts. Yes, it happens a lot of times, especially when you're looking for, in my experience, it happens mostly with business development people or sales people who have some experience in the market, and then they venture out starting their own businesses, trying to get their own stuff going, but unfortunately it doesn't work and they go back to looking for the job. I think there's no harm in that, and it's perfectly fine to share that information. It's everybody's right. I mean, let's face it, to do what they want to do. Not everybody succeeds. It doesn't mean that they are not qualified. It doesn't mean that they are not skilled or that they are incompetent. You have to share your evaluation based on what you've found out on their previous experience. So yeah, I think that's perfectly fine, but not just tell them, oh, they didn't succeed. So you have to give you a complete evaluation about their profile. Take the client in confidence. There's a way of presenting that information. If you just go and sit with them and say, this guy did this and he failed, the moment they hear this failed, you will put them off. So give them a holistic picture, show them what this person is capable of and why do you think he's good, and what his profile is. If you give them a complete profile, then yes, it should be all right. And don't just simply throw that onto them. That then of course that will not work. Sumit, which question above? Which I was just talking about, or any other?
Waqar, there's one question from Eram Firdosh.
Yeah, okay. My question is, once the candidate is selected and joined the organization, and after a few days he quits, how to cope up with this type of challenges? That depends on your interview evaluation. That is why it is very important that you spend time on the person's profile and develop your questionnaire that you need to ask. This is where your skill comes, and it comes with experience. Their attitude towards the job, their attitude towards or the seriousness towards or seriousness in their career, you can gather that information from the interviewing. However, one thing is very important. Assessing a human being is the most difficult job. You will not always be 100% correct, and you will not always be wrong. So you have to make it as objective as possible and as measurable as possible, and try to put them at ease so that they are able to share all the aspects of their personality and their career. If you're able to gather that information from your interviews, I think you can find that out. But again, even if, no matter how good you are in your interview process, it will never guarantee that the person will join and stay there. It doesn't happen all the time. So Meeta, sometimes the candidates are rejected in technical tests. How to evaluate such candidates? Because in resume and verbal conversation, the candidates are doing good. Again, it's not just one aspect of the job. It's all the aspects. What are more important? If the technical skills are more important, if they have high weightage, then having good soft skills will not do it. So you have to look at the whole package, and you have to see the weightages and what's more important and what's not important, and then base your decision on that. My doubt is there are lots of candidates, Suraj. My doubt is there are lots of candidates we get as of their communication skill is really low, but their experience matches the descriptions. Or maybe more. Can we select such candidates, or should we move with other candidate? And also, we also come across candidates who have got more potential and also good communication skills, but no experience. But I think I get your point. So as I said, you have to evaluate if the strengths are greater than weaknesses. In some positions, for instance, like in accounts positions, they're not facing the client. So communication can be something that you can compromise on. It's something that you can help them improve. But somebody who is client facing, who's in business development, who's in sales, who's in promotion, or who's on a senior level manager position, then definitely communication is very, very important, regardless if they are good in technical skills. So it basically depends on the job profile, and based on that, in some positions, communication skills are not that important. In some positions, it will be.
Waqar, we'll take one last question. There's a question from Azhar Ahmad on your screen.
Yes, there are some senior who are working in MNCs, but they took break for a couple of years, but they want to get into the job stream again, but our clients are asking for continuously engagement. Client candidates still convincing, but still the client says company policy, but candidate is. So if they have taken a break, the position, well, again, consistency matters in a lot of positions. Somebody who has taken a break of a couple of years will not be in touch with the market compared to somebody who has a consistent working. For instance, somebody who's been working in IT market, just giving an example, he's taken a break for 2 years and now he wants to be in the same position. Probably he might be not that familiar. So again, if you are making your assessments measurable and they are objective and quantifiable, you can convince the client. If their knowledge is good, if they're updated, if they have good contacts, you might be able to convince the clients, but somebody is not that much familiar and has been off, there's a chance that they might not be in touch with the latest trends.
Right, Waqar, I think we're done with the questions now. I really appreciate that you spent this time with us. There was a little consideration we had in our mind is to the cultural differences of operations in the UAE and in India. But I think what you did is you covered it very well in terms of it being different, but it being very similar, and how we could learn from the UAE and what the UAE could learn from India. I know people in the UAE really value their time. And for you to spend an hour and 15 minutes to brief us, we really appreciate. Thank you really for this wonderful session. And I'm sure my team will get back to you with more questions. They do have your contact details. I'll share them with them, your LinkedIn profile. And if they have more questions, they'll be more than happy to connect with you. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of people on this call. I did see the number go up to 83 at one point of time. So we've still had a good 54, 55 people engaged till the very end. So I really appreciate you spending this time, Waqar, and I wish you all the very best. I hope all of us get out of this COVID situation, and Talent Corner and you and me, we get to work together in the future again.
Sure, definitely. Just stay home, stay safe.
Great. Team, if anybody wants to say the quick thank yous, they can say the quick thank yous on the chat box, and then we will end this meeting.
Thank you very much, guys, for listening. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. I hope I was able to clarify all your queries. Stay in touch. Do get back to me through LinkedIn. If you have any questions, I would love to answer those. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.